in Sunan Ampel, Surabaya, and a professor in Sociology of Education. And over the next 2 hours, he will guide us through a productive and engaging discussion. We would like to invite Professor Ahmad Muzaki as the chair and all the speakers, Kiai Haji Dr. Honoris Causa Yahya Holil Syakuf and Professor Dr. Siti Ruhaini Zuhayatin to the stage.
Sahib al-Fadilah al-Ustadz Dr. Ahmad Muzaki, Raisa Jamiati Sunan Ampel al-Islamiyah al-Hukumiyah Surabaya, Sadah As-Sayyid Ad-Duktur Yahya Khalil Sakuf, Ar-Rais Al-Am li Jam'iyati Nahdlatul Ulama, Fadilat al-Ustadzah Ad-Duktur Siti Ruhaini Zuhayatin al-Ustadz fi Majalil Hukuk Al-Insaniyah Jami'ah Sunan Kalijaga Al-Islamiyah Al-Hukumiyah Yogyakarta.
We would like to invite one more speaker, Professor Abdullah Ahmed An-Naim, and he will give the speech online.
وأيضا عندنا الباحث الثالث فضيلة الأستاذ الدكتور عبد الله أحمد النعيم أستاذ في مجال القانون والدين جامعة إيموري سيقدم بحثه عبر أدوات الاتصال.
For the chair and speaker, sincerely, time is yours.
Sadatul Hudur nad'uhum ila minasah mashkuran.
Good morning, everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first plenary session under the sub-theme or themes, Rethinking Fiqh for non-violent religious practices. We have three speakers basically. The one just on the left of me, Professor Ruhaini Zuhayatin, Mbak Eni, specializing in gender studies, human rights issues, and also Islamic law. And it's a great honor to have her here to talk about how the fiqh can be reoriented to develop values and spirits of non-violent religious practices. And Al-Mukarram Ad-Duktur Kiai Haji Yahya Khalil Sakuf has been over here, basically. But he is somewhere just close to this university. He will come to join us in this first plenary session. And the third speaker is Professor Abdullahi Ahmed An-Naim. He would like to have a chat on Islamic law from the States. I would like to, can you open up the screen for the Zoom session for him? I would like to say hello, Professor Abdullahi An-Naim. We are now here in the morning, but Professor Abdullahi An-Naim on the other round in the middle of the night. So I would like to have him first to talk in front of us. The IT man, can you help me please? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Islamic extremism, religious terrorism, radicalism under the banner of Islam, these are some phrases and also concepts now lingering in the current development of human life. And we would like to address this issue by, okay, Professor Abdullahi An-Naim. Assalamualaikum, Prof. An-Naim. Are you with us?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Okay, on cam, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, exactly. Can I have you on video?
I already joined the video and I'm also unmuted. I don't know. It says the host is not allowing participants to unmute themselves. So the organizers have to unmute me. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we exactly hear you. But would like to have you on cam, so just to make sure to the IT man.
I am here. I joined and I'm ready to go, but just let me in.
Okay, Professor An-Naim, can you open up the camera so we can have you on camera? Because we, exactly. Okay, big applause to Professor Abdullahi An-Naim.
I'm sorry. My apologies. I'm sorry. Now, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. أنا أتشرف بهذه الفرصة لأشارك في هذا المؤتمر الهام والممتاز، مع تأكيد أن التكنولوجي الحديث هو الذي يمكنني من أن أشارك. So I will speak in English. Hopefully, inshallah, I will be understood by all participants. I am grateful for the opportunity to participate, which has been facilitated by modern technology. And this is relevant to our subject because the nature of technology is such that the globe or the world has been integrated into a single unity of humanity. Yeah, the famous phrase by the Canadian scholar, the global village, sometimes it is overstated, but I think there is always a level of it that can guide our thinking and our interactions. So I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. As many of you may know, I am from Sudan, and I have been in Sudan recently until a few weeks ago. And tragically, events in Sudan have made it extremely difficult for Muslim Sudanese to remain in their homes and to continue with their lives. An estimated 500,000 Sudanese have been driven out of their homes by the fighting between two Muslim factions. And the issue is power. It is not piety, it is not justice, it is not developed, it is just sheer hunger for violence and for power. This is very instructive for all of us to understand that being Muslim does not immune us from all the frailties of human beings. Human beings tend to be ambitious, tend to be violent, tend to be exclusive of others, and for that we have to rethink our discourse and our scholarship to see how we can facilitate a superior level of humanity among Muslims by virtue of their being Muslims, not by reference to some other external criteria. But we must drive our humanity from our convictions, from our religious practice. And that is what I would like to briefly speak to, and inshallah be able to respond to any questions you may have later on. Now, I think the first question when my friend and colleague Nasir invited me to participate and suggested the title of reconceptualizing, this is the grand scene, reconceptualizing the equal humanity and sustainable peace. That is the key here, equal humanity, not equal religious piety or conviction, which are private and internal matters that we cannot presume to share even with the person sitting next to us, let alone someone who is half a world away. The point is that we are all human beings. All religious traditions, all ideological approaches, all political regimes, all levels of power and wealth, none of that takes away from our humanity or adds to it. We are humans by virtue of the way Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala made us. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. The Quran says, we have honored the human being. It does not say we have honored Muslims or Catholics or Buddhists or any other religious or cultural tradition. By virtue of our being human, we have been honored. And that is the responsibility we have to share. Because only we can realize that promise for ourselves. Not by simply proclaiming a religious belief, but by the way we live our lives, and by the way we share our concerns as human beings, for every issue or concern that human beings tend to have. I thought I might start briefly with touching on the need for a shared understanding of what we are talking about. Because I think we tend to assume that I know what I mean and you know what I mean, therefore we all share the same understanding. But of course, obviously, let us just simply raise the question, do we share the understanding of what the issues are about? And do we share them with our communities, not only with our colleagues and fellow academics and scholars? But I'm talking about if we want to talk about transforming our religious practice into a more humane and civilized and peaceful coexistence, we have to make sure that we understand what we are talking about. I think that the point here is raise a question for us to think about and not to assume that we share the understanding. In fact, when I received the invitation, I wrote back asking for clarification of the title, so that I know that I share, at least with my friends and colleagues who invited me, the same understanding of the issues. Now, the term fiqh is used in, I see that it's used in the title of the panel, and it is known and understood by I'm sure all of our colleagues at this conference. But in different parts of the Muslim world, we tend to use different terms. Fiqh is used in my part, which is East African Muslims, but also Sharia is used. And whether it is Sharia or fiqh, the point is that whatever understanding and practice of Islam we have is a product of our own thinking and rationality. It is not something that is descending on us from heaven without any intermediate language or cultural or contextual issues. So let us be humble in understanding that every single understanding of any principle of methodology or principle of content in fiqh, in Islamic jurisprudence, is the product of human interpretation and understanding. It is not divine, it is human. The Quran is divine, the Hadith is divine, but any human understanding of Quran or Hadith is human. I think this point is very helpful to emphasize, so that when we disagree about what the terms mean and what the concepts mean, what the verses mean, which verse is relevant or not relevant, applicable or not applicable, muhkama or ghair muhkama, when we disagree on any of that, it is we as human beings who disagree with other human beings. And this will demystify and will really bring down to our comprehension what we are talking about when we talk about fiqh. I hope this point, I don't need to elaborate further if it's clear enough, to say that let us have the confidence and the humility to understand that our conceptions of fiqh, or what if you call Sharia, or even Islam itself, is our human understanding, not the divine itself. The Quran is divine, but our understanding of it is human. Now, the way that I see that the conference organizers conceptualize the issue is to talk about rethinking fiqh. And rethinking is clear enough that there is something that is problematic about the way we understand fiqh, or we interpret Islamic sources and principles through fiqh. And fiqh, by the way, as I'm sure that you all know, the meaning is simply understanding. Fiqh is fahm, to understand. It is not something mysterious. And in the term itself, we find a way out already. That since it is about understanding, we are human beings, and the Quran repeatedly speaks about tendency as human beings to disagree. And it says that only Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala will resolve our differences in the next life. So it is not something, again, to take as problematic. Disagreement is inherent to the human condition. But the difference is that we have to talk at a level that brings us together in a way that we can then share our understanding, and then develop and build our consensus, our ijma'. And ijma' has always been a tremendously powerful source of Islamic thought and Islamic jurisprudence, because it is inclusive. It is the consensus of all, not only the privileged or the so-called scholars or the ulama. It is the consensus of the majority, and then eventually the totality of Muslims. That's where we can find common ground. So here it goes that, therefore, the question for me is, do we share with because the title implies to me that we somehow, as privileged scholars of our communities, have sought a task of persuading our communities to share our thinking. And I think that can be rather somewhat arrogant, with all due respect, because it is not really that we are in a position to instruct our communities, but we are in a position to communicate our shared understanding and the urgency of shared solutions for our problems, in the hope of including everybody in that outcome. So that is the point I need to clarify about the title, that it is not really sort of arrogant, sort of usurpation of understanding on which we instruct our communities. So let us find out whether our communities already share our understanding, and if they do, whether we can elaborate out of that shared understanding further development of thinking that resolve the issues that are controversial in our practice. Because I am from Sudan, as I started by saying that as I speak, fighting is going on among different factions, among Muslims of Sudan, because nobody is claiming to be an exclusive Muslim to the other. All claim to be, and in fact they do it in the name of Islam. They do it in the name of justice. They do it in the name of democracy. My point is that we cannot pretend that it's all peaceful and loving and caring, because we know that in many parts of the Muslim world there is violence, unfortunately. And that violence may start always, I think, by people who assume that they have guardianship over others about how to understand Islam. And that is where we have seen it erupting in every part of Yemen and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. We have fighting between Boko Haram or between Islamic State constituencies and Muslim communities in West Africa, in the Middle East, all over. We have seen bloody, dreadful wars going on for decades among Muslims, between Muslims. So it is not simply we are immune or somewhat exempt from the frailties of human behavior and thinking. What we need to do is to create an internal motivation. And that point is, for me, it's very critical, that we are not just simply citing the context as a source of guidance. We are understanding our guidance, which is in the Quran and Sunnah, by virtue of the context in which we live. There is a point, and I don't want to take the time I am allowed, but the point about historically understanding, I think, is that the text guide the context, as if the Quran text and the Hadith text, which is always a human understanding of that text, somehow controls the context in which we live. And what we are inviting, I am sharing with the organizers the conviction that we want to reverse that. We want to say that our understanding of the text is shaped by our context. So it is almost like reversing a historical misconception of context as inferior to text, whereas in fact context is the framework within which text is understood. And from here we can see that the way the world has come to be, and I referenced the question of technology earlier on, the question of the global integration of knowledge, of understanding, of struggles for justice, for human rights, all of that is not out of the devil. It is Rabbana subhanahu wa ta'ala guided humanity in this way. So it is not like something that we can dismiss lightly. We take it as the guidance that we have in our life as Muslims, sharing the world with others. Indonesia, and I have been privileged to visit Indonesia several times, and I have met different varieties of Muslims in Indonesia. And therefore it is not a question of just simply proclaiming that my understanding is the only understanding. It is rather a conversation that we have so that my understanding is shared and shaped by the context in which I and everybody else lives. I think that I would maybe stop here because I'm not quite, I had asked for guidance about where I am time-wise. I hope I have not overstayed the line already, but the point I think that I made are the points that I intended to make. And I'm happy to see many friends in the audience and also to be really looking forward to a conversation with you all. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mashkur Ustad Abdullah An-Naim. Thanks for the presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, are you still available to be with us for?
Yes, I'll be here.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Professor An-Naim. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor An-Naim reminds us of the basic notion of al-fiqh. Al-fiqh huwa al-fahm. That is all about understanding of religious notions, the basic notions of religion. And he reminds us of the coverage of fiqh, not only to do with rituals, but also allowing us to deal with the issues of humanity and also human rights. Thanks for Professor Naim. And now I'm inviting Professor Mbak Eni, Professor Hani Duhayatin. She's now working for the presidency office in Jakarta, specializing in Islamic law, human rights, and gender issues. Now time is yours, Professor Eni.
Thank you very much, Prof. Rector, who I'm very proud of. He's my dearly brother, and of course, what is really attracting me to come to this conference, especially because of his invitations. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'in wa ala umuri dunya waddin wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain amma ba'du. And also I would like to express my gratitude to the committee of this conference, and this is actually the third invitations that extending to me, but unfortunately this is the first conference that I can attend for this moment. I also very delighted to be able to communicate with my mentor and also my great teacher, Professor Abdullah An-Naim. And I would like also to welcome Brother Professor Mas'ud Badrin. He is also with us, with Professor Abdullah An-Naim, in trying to negotiate between Sharia in our modern lives, especially, particularly in my field in Indonesia. I'm working with Professor An-Naim for 1 year in trying to excavate and also trying to identify what kind of facts, what kind of Sharia that is negotiated in Indonesia. So this morning, I would like to continue what has been clearly explained by Professor Abdullah An-Naim. Actually, I prepare a very short PowerPoint. If the committee can help me to open only page 4, because Professor Professor An-Naim explained to us that, of course, there is the text, that is the prevailing text of the fiqh that we have been inherited from generations, centuries ago. But the fiqh itself is very complex in terms of the reinterpretations and also the application. the things that I would like to mention here, the first is actually the content of the fiqh, and the second is the authority, and the third is, of course, the efforts in rethinking fiqh in more inclusive manner in order to respond to our complex issues and matters related to our current lives. And the second is how such our endeavor to revisit fiqh into much more inclusive in relation to, first is the national interest, and the second also for the international demands in our times. So if it is possible for the committee to have their, if it is not, it is, page 4 please, yes. So Professor Abdul Naim said that fiqh and Sharia is actually very complex in terms of the construction and also the term of the applications. And we also understand in our discussion and deliberation in our universities that Sharia law and fiqh is interchangeably used by us. But let me begin with the content. I concur what Professor Abdullah An-Naim has been briefed to us that fiqh and Sharia law is actually very dynamic, diverse, and changing over time and over generation. And also the important things that should be underlined is that fiqh is now interact with what is called the modern state. Yeah? So we have to take into account the issue on how fiqh is implemented in the modern state, including also fiqh, which also now remains individual endeavor and also collective endeavor in many parts of Muslim countries. But I'm not going further about the content and the essence of Sharia, but I will jump into what is actually the authority of fiqh or Sharia in our time. So generally and initially, fiqh is actually the individual endeavor. Individual endeavor of a certain scholar in Muslim traditions, and then it starts in generations, so that it's become the madhab. But still, we have to understand that fiqh is individual endeavor, and then it become collective. Yeah. So it's collective consensus of using parts of fiqh. And in this modern Indonesia, our understanding and our reality here is that, and we are very grateful to have this, that fiqh and Islamic law is still remains in the civil supremacy. I mean, this is not the law, or this is not the regulation, and this is not the substance that it is controlled by the state. Of course, in some points, Sharia law is adopted by the state in a certain matters, but mostly we are very grateful that fiqh and Islamic Sharia law is still in the hand of the civil supremacy, which led and withhold by the Muslim organizations like Muhammadiyah, Nahdlatul Ulama, Persis, Nahdlatul Ulama, and so forth. So I would say that Indonesia is actually can be the model on how the fiqh and how the Islamic law is kept and remain in the hands of civil society. And this is it will have very a significant impact in the future, that if we can maintain this situation here in Indonesia. And Professor An-Naim has also witnessed when he was here writing his latest book on Islam and the future Sharia and secular state, saying that Indonesia can be the model for such application. Now, and the second part is the state. What is the position of the state in this regard? Before I come to this discussion, I would like to highlight in the third part that Indonesia has been going through what is called the social transformations from the ethno-religious communality into what is called the modern nation states, based on the individual citizenship. So this transformation ideally has to be also followed by the nature of Sharia, because we know that our inherited Sharia is mostly exclusive, is mostly based on the ethno-religious communality in the past. And it has to be transformed as such to meet the needs of the new nation states, which based on the individual citizenship. So my question here is actually, does our fiqh reflect such a transformation? Actually, Indonesia underwent this transformation in 1928 from the ethno-religious communality into the nation state. But unfortunately, our study on fiqh and Sharia is not in lines with such a transformation. Say, for example, still that what we are studying about maqasid Sharia, Professor Zaki, is still even in the very modern instance introduced by Ash-Shatibi, for example. The first maqasid Syar'i is Hifdul Din. This is actually what Professor An-Naim reminded us, that this is actually the exclusive nature of Sharia or exclusive nature of fiqh, because Hifdul Din is come after Hifdul Nas. And this is actually the key and the core issue that we have to work out in the future on, is it possible to us to reverse the maqasid syar'i whereby the Hifdul Nas is come first before the Hifdul of Din. We just ignore this. This is actually, that's my explanation. Because this core issue is hindered very much in a way that we align our fiqh with the constitution, with our Indonesian constitution. Because in our constitution, the protections of the state first is actually Hifdul Nafs first. And then after that, then it's going to the Hifdul Din, Hifdul, the family, the protection of the family, the protection of individual. But this is actually the core that we have to take very serious attention on, how to reverse the positions of Hifdul Din before, or the Hifdul Din after Hifdul Nafs. And of course, this is a very, I would say it's a very radical effort if we are going to do this. And I think our deliberations in these universities, I mean in Islamic universities, has to touch upon these sensitive issues. This is in terms of the national level. And in the international level, maybe Professor Masud Badrin will give us more elaboration on this. upon the international consensus of human rights based on hifdun nafs first. It's not hifdun din. And of course, Professor Anaim and Professor Bradin, this is our serious challenge on that. And of course, this challenge is, I brought this challenge to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, where I was chair for 3 years in Jeddah, on how the commissioners, how to change the perspective of the commissioner in dealing with maqasid al-shar'i. And this is not very simple. Even in the 6 years, we don't have the single consensus of this maqasid. Colleagues, distinguished colleagues, this is actually the most challenging fiqh in the national level when we are talking about convention, when we are talking about declarations, and how now we still have psychological hinders in negotiating between Islamic declaration of Islamic universal of human rights and the international declaration of human rights. And I would like to end this presentation by flooring to the audience about the recent endeavor. It's very unique initiatives promoted by the Islamic cooperations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or otherwise in Indonesia we know OKI, and United States. This is very unique collaborations between the OIC and United States when the two, it's not the two countries, of course, this is the regional countries and United States agreed in proposing the resolutions, very well-known resolution of 1618, and you are also working on that, on the combating intolerance, stereotyping, incitement to violence to person based on faith. And this resolution is actually the very ample challenge to us to rethinking about the exclusive manner, exclusive contents of fiqh based on the maqasid Syar'i, the classic maqasid of Syar'i, into the inclusive fiqh based on the new understanding of the maqasid, where the hifdhu nafs has to come first before hifdhu din. And this is actually also the challenge of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperations, on how to negotiate this so that our understanding, our consensus of fiqh, our consensus of Sharia law, our consensus of laws, what is been highlighted by Professor Anaim, is become our effort, our endeavor in the Islamic University in Indonesia to come to this to understanding in order to really negotiate between our inclusive Sharia with the International Convention and Declaration. I think I stop here, and I'm very happy to have questions from the audience. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the moderator. Thank you.
Okay. Again, please join us to have and give a big applause to Professor Rohainuddin Hayatin. Ladies and gentlemen, Al-Mukarram K. Yahya Khalil Stakuf on the way to this venue. I just would like to let you know that the participants coming to this venue is more than 1,000 people, more than 1,000 participants. But adding to that, we have also around 350 participants joining this conference through Zoom digital application. So if we make a total, it's almost 2,000 participants joining this first plenary session. Thanks very much for everybody. Professor An-Naim, still with us, and also Professor Enidu Hayatin. We've heard very valuable contributions from the previous two speakers, coming to terms with the current problematic issues behind the notions of fiqh and also legal positive law. Please welcome Al-Mukarram Kiai Yahya Khalil Saquf. Benny? Well, thanks everybody. I would like to let Al-Mukarram Kiai Yahya Khalil Saquf know about the materials presented by Professor Abdullahi An-Naim, allowing us, giving us rooms to reflect upon the notions of fiqh in relation not only to the rituals but also to humanity and also positive law. And Indonesia, under the scrutiny of Professor Abdullahi An-Naim, is one of the role models for negotiating a fiqh, Sharia law with the positive and also humanity. And Professor Ruhaini Hayatin, one of the remarkable female leaders of Muhammadiyah. Elaborating more, Al-Mukarram Kiai Yahya, saying that Indonesia is one of the best role model for negotiating fiqh and also humanity, human rights, and positive law. She gives us a more elaborate understanding of how Indonesia becomes and also implemented social transformation from ethno-religious communality to modern state of Muslim life. And she also just suggested that why Indonesia becomes the role model for that is because Muslims in Indonesia put hifdun nafas first before other four al-hifd. Hifduddin, hifdul mal, wa ila akhirih. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite Al-Mukarram Kiai Yahya Khalil Saquf to give us a much deeper understanding of how to rethink fiqh for non-violent religious practices. Time is just Professor Yahya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, syukurullah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulullah, Sayyidina Maulana Muhammad ibn Abdullah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ala ma ba'd. His Excellency Dr. Abdullahi An-Naim, His Excellency Dr. Sri Siti Ruhaini, Dr. Muzaki, distinguished participants, I need to apologize because of being late to arrive in this place. I just arrived from Jakarta with this morning flight. It is an honor to be involved in this important conference with a very, very, not just important, but also very crucial topics, which is how we should address the problem of Islamic views with the need in the context of our current reality to develop a more harmonious, more stable and secure global and human civilization. As much as it is very little to be admitted, as much as the intellectuals and religious leaders are reluctant to acknowledge that Islam actually has a crucial problem in positioning itself within the context of our current reality, and that there are still in many momentums and in various places in the world where Islam somehow becomes one of the source, or at least has a big role in creating problematic social and political dynamics. While at the same time, it is actually the reality. If we talk about Middle East, if we talk about various places in Africa, and also even various places in the West, like in America and Europe, Islam is a problem. That's just simply the fact, whether we acknowledge or not. And we have also our own experience in Indonesia when Islam is a problem in our own social and political dynamics. Nowadays, we are kind of anxious in, facing the coming political momentum, which is the 2024 presidential and general elections, because we are afraid, we have a great concern that political actors might utilize Islam as a political weapon to gain support. And that, this way of politicking would endanger the social integrity of our nation. So, but we are so afraid to admit that. maybe some people would accuse anybody who admit this problem with blasphemy. Well, it is a fact, let's just admit it. It's simple. What we need to do is to understand why Islam is continuing to be a problem. In 2017, not long ago, together with the young adult, Nahdlatul Ulama young adult movement, the Gerakan Pemuda Ansor, we held an international conference on a topic that we called humanitarian Islam, meaning Islam that serves all humanity. The original terminology actually was of Arabic term, which was Al-Islam lil-Insaniyah, or in Indonesian, Islam untuk kemanusiaan, meaning Islam that serves all humanity. We was thinking about to create an English terminology of Islam for humanity, but then we thought it might confuse people in the West. They might feel that we want to get all human beings to convert to Islam. If we say Islam for humanity. So we made a little twist by saying humanitarian Islam. In that conference, we were discussing about the exact problem that I just mentioned, which is why Islam keeps being a problem in the dynamics of our current reality. Now, in that discussion, in that conference, we came to a conclusion that we cannot ignore the fact that the legacy of Islamic discourse from the classical era, which is from the medieval era, plays a fundamental and very important role in shaping the religious view of Muslims up until our time. Wherever Muslims are talking about Islam, whether it is in public conversation or in various more private context, people always refer to the somehow established Islamic discourse from the medieval era, because it is considered to still be authoritative up until now. And also in almost all of our Islamic educational institutions, the material of education, the materials of Islamic education, still are derived from the discourse of medieval era. Now, it becomes a problem when the context of reality changes. We are now living in a world that is totally different from the context of the previous era. In the past, in medieval era, up until at least the World War II, the construct of civilization, and it is not just for Islam, but for all global civilization, was the construct of imperial competition. We know that in the past, there were various imperiums fighting each other, competing to conquer, to have more spaces and lands all over the world. And it was not just between Islam and non-Islam imperium or civilization, but it was just all against all, you know. We know that among various different Christian kingdoms in Europe, there was also a fierce competition between, for example, the Britain, you know, the England and the Dutch and French and Germany and so forth, which was maybe Prussia in the past. There was severe competition. And war was like a daily business in the past. War not just between Muslims against and non-Muslims, but also between any other, you know, social political establishment against the competitors. So conflicts and wars were the establishment of global civilizational construct in the past, at least until World War II. But now we come to a reality where this kind of war is simply unaffordable anymore for human civilization because of the, you know, the growing globalization and also the growing development of military technology, which produces more and more, you know, greater and greater destructive weapons. And the international community actually then was, you know, very early aware of this reality, that then there was an international consensus created to prevent, you know, to create a construct where wars can be more, you know, prevented, avoided, and global security and stability could be more achieved. That's how the United Nations Charter was created. And it is what the charter was for, to prevent a globally destructive war and to, to strive for more global security and stability. Now, so with this, and this, starting with this charter, the UN Charter, then emerged a new construct of global civilization, which no longer is based on military competitions among imperiums, but based on international consensus, more on international consensus. Now that ulama then, after long and actually painful discussion, examination, research, we came to conclusion that this international consensus, namely the United Nations Charter, was the starting point of the emergence of this new global civilizational construct, represented by a new emerging international order. It is the international order that we have now. And based on this new international order, then emerged also the logical, consequential needs, including the needs to, to correct the mode of interaction between various different groups of identity, including religious identity. You see, in the past, before this international consensus, conflicts between Islam and non-Islam was normal. For more than 13 centuries, actually, Islam, represented by, social political entities that claims the label of Islam, were engaging in eternal conflicts and wars against social political entities of others. Started from the very beginning, or the earliest era of the birth of Islam itself. In the first, it was for survival. And then, after that, it was about competition between different, imperial entities. So, now, since we already concluded that we cannot afford anymore this kind of conflicts, because, it's just rationally and logically, such conflicts will bring the world into total collapse of international civilization. Because if we allow the continuation of conflicts between different groups of identities, then the whole human civilization will simply collapse. And it's just, undeniable logic. That's why then we began to talk about tolerance, the need for tolerance between Muslim and non-Muslim. Since when? Since this international consensus. Before that, why should we be tolerant to others? No, if we want to conflict, just go to war. It was normal in the past. That's why we did not tolerate the allies, military, when they arrived in Surabaya to, reclaim Indonesia under Dutch authority. We did not tolerate them. Nahdlatul Ulama actually then issued a fatwa of jihad back then. And the rationale for the call for jihad that time was a jihad against the infidels. It was that, it was exactly that. We went to war against the infidels, which were the Allies military. That's what we did in the past. But now after that, after this new international consensus, then we came to, awareness that we cannot continue this. We cannot even continue conflict against the Dutch on the basis of, what they did to Indonesia in the past. They occupy Indonesia in the past. We simply have to make peace with them. We make peace with Japan. Now we also make peace with different groups of identities internally, domestically in Indonesia, because we now know that we need this. Because if, we do not have the harmonious interrelation between different groups of identities, then Indonesia would not survive. That's why Nahdlatul Ulama now, is trying so hard to have a harmonious relationship with Muhammadiyah, for example. We did not need that in the past. Right? It's just the reality. But now, since we have the need, the crucial need to preserve the integrity of our nation, then we need to strive for harmonious relationships. Now that is why, and this is due to, the emerging needs coming from the emerging new construct or new context of reality. But then the problem is that we still lacking the authoritative discourse, Islamic discourse, to support this. Up until now, what we have is the primary reference for our religious views and the religious views of Muslim community is still the discourse of the medieval era. And this comes also to the educational materials that we teach to our children up until today. Because we still, have not, had alternative for that. Up until today, for example, we still teach in our madrasas, elementary madrasas, for example, in the subject of history, we teach them with the summary of Nurul Yakin, Khulasah Nurul Yakin. That is the most, popular, reference book for teaching of Islamic history in our elementary madrasas. And when we look into that summary, we see I would say it's a war accounting. In that books, what is recorded in that book is battle accounting. In this battle, how many, casualties, how many were captured, how much was the Ghanima, and so forth. It's just like a debit and credit of battle. And that implant a mindset in our children about the continuation of conflicts against others. So we have a big problem here, ladies and gentlemen. A big, big problem if we truly want a new civilizational construct. And if we really care, we need to generate alternative discourse on this problem, and then we need to work even harder to generate, educational reform in our, religious teachings, our religious educational institutions. So that is why recently in February the 6th, Nahdlatul Ulama held an international conference that we called the International Conference on the Fiqh of Civilization. The first, so we name it as the International Conference on the Fiqh of Civilization, the first, because we intend to have it as a regular agenda. At least, if we can, we want to do it annually or at least biennially, because we have so many problems to discuss related to this matter. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great hope from our side, from Nahdlatul Ulama side, that this conference, the AICIS conference, would produce, something really decisive related to this. Because things are getting worse and worse, and we have to race against time. And our children and grandchildren really need this. Without this, it is just a true concern, actual concerns that we potentially would fail in reserving this world for them as a better, a better world, better civilization that we and our predecessors have. So thank you for this opportunity Nahdlatul Ulama already we are compiling quite huge materials of discourse related to this matter, and I can say that in near future, we are working on this, and in near future, we will be ready to share these materials with various academic, various circles of academic community, domestically and internationally, inshallah. So again, thank you. Wallahu al-muwaffiq ila aqwamit tariq. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
A broader sense of fiqh, Al-Mukarram K. Yahya drives us, Prof. Ruhaini, to deal with the issue of fiqh not only in terms of sociologically understanding of how fiqh has been so far formulated, but also he drove us to go beyond the sociological perspective of fiqh, but also covering the issues of what important schools and madrasa for teaching new understanding of fiqh for better life in the future. Again, please join us to give big applause to Al-Mukarram K. Yahya. Ladies and gentlemen, we have three speakers having done presenting their own perspectives of fiqh, rethinking fiqh for non-violent religious practices. And we have also on the screen Al-Mukarram Professor An-Naim, and then Professor Ruhaini Duhatin and Al-Mukarram K. Yahya. We still have time, around 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. I'm now open up a Q&A session. So far, one from female perspective. Female first, after gentleman. Oh, sorry. One from my left side, and then the other one from the male side. Okay, that one, Professor Hamdan from the male perspective. And ibu-ibu, fatayat, ummahat, akhwat, muslimat, Aisyah. One from female participants. Or probably from the Zoom digital platform. The IT man, can I have a point from you? Anyone from Zoom? No one. Okay, again from female participants. None? None? We've got female speaker here. May I? No? Okay. Professor Hamdan and then Professor Wawan. You may guess, Prof. Hamdan.
Thank you very much, Professor Ahmad Muzaki. Assalamualaikum.
Can you come in closer to the microphone, please?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Actually, I just have one question, especially I address to Kiai Haji Yahya Khalil Stakuf, the general head of Central Board of Nahdlatul Ulama. I am very interested in the way you explain the presence of international conference that can reduce and overcome the historical conflict of the borders and belief. Now, my simple question to Gus Ketum, PBNU, is that is it still possible to ask the international authorities to make the international consensus of many aspects of the problems of the present situation of our world. For example, the international consensus of regulating the transnational movement of ideology, number one. The second one, the international consensus of regulating the transnational movement of the jihad movement. And the third one is that regulating the social media, especially relating to ideological movement. And the last one, Gus Ketum,
You having 10 questions or 15 questions?
Yes, this is the last. Yeah, the closing one. The last one, Gus Ketum, is that what is the role of the Central Board of Nahdlatul Ulama, which is under your leadership. It is very spectacularly acknowledged with the international participation and contribution. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thanks, Prof. Hamdan. Prof. Awan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Excuse me, my teacher. I am Mr. Wawan Wahidin as a rector in UIN Banten. Just one question. Experience is the best teacher. Pengalaman guru terbaik. Indonesia saat ini darurat korupsi, darurat narkoba. Kemudian ada dua pendekatan penegakan hukum. Kalau di Aceh itu based on syariah, konun, another based on non-konun. Mana yang lebih efektif sehingga Indonesia ini bisa diselamatkan? Pendekatan fikih syariah. Assalamualaikum.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Awan. Now I'm talking to Professor An-Naim. Are you still with us, Prof. Naim? Oh, okay. Left there. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're really sorry to have Professor Naim leaving the Zoom digital platform because it's already very late night in the States. Okay, we have two questions from a couple of questions from Professor Hamdan and also Prof. Wawan. But I've got one question from previous participant. Okay, but I'll let Professor Ruhaini first to respond to some questions from the participants and then followed by Al-Mukarram Kayahya.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Rektor. Excellency Al-Mukarram Kiai Dr. Yahya Khalil Stakuf, and it is a great honor to be in the forum with you. And even though I'm not representing Muhammadiyah in this time, but I think this is quite a very important moment when I learned also the shift of the relationship between the two organizations, and this is promising. And we are very grateful because the two organizations is now led by the very great sociologists. So Al-Mukarram and also Ketua PP Muhammadiyah is both of them are graduated from the same school. So this is really a kind of a promise to Indonesia to forge into more inclusive and also is more anticipating what's happening in the global, as also mentioned by Al-Mukarram. Pak Rektor, I think my response is only continuing the highlight issue by Al-Mukarram about the necessity to rethinks and revisit the maqasid syar'i, especially when Al-Mukarram mentioned about the importance of putting forward their humanity. Hifdhun Nas has to be, as I said earlier, Hifdhun Nas is supposed to be proceedings, the other hifdh. And Al-Mukarram, this is also my question, is it possible in Indonesia that we start revisiting this maqasid with a new perspective of the National Declaration of Human Rights and also the Cairo Declaration of Islamic Human Rights? As I said earlier, that I used to be the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission in that institution. And still this is the big homework, Al-Mukarram, that even the OIC still struggling in shifting their understandings of maqasid Sharia. But still, as mentioned earlier by Pak Rektor Pak Rektor Makassar, that is it possible, and possibility is there, because it just needs more substantial role from Indonesia, Al-Mukarram, to the OIC. Because our practice here in Indonesia is always, Professor Bardin will also maybe elaborate on that, the need for negotiating maqasid syar'i has its formal institution, its political institution in the OIC. And as I said, I mentioned earlier, the resolution 1618 that has been co-promoted by the OIC and the United States is can be considered as the first big step for the future that humanity will enshrin in our international and our multilateral relationship, and hopefully it will also be the new perspective of the OIC in the future. So I think this is my response to all the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will try to make an articulation that hopefully will address, the questions that were presented. See, first, people usually are confusing Sharia with fiqh. Many people think that fiqh is just, Sharia itself, while the thing is that it's a different things. It's two different things. Sharia is something more paradigmatic, while fiqh is like the operational discourse of Sharia in addressing the actual realities, the waqa'i. So, while Sharia is indeed something that more sort of final, fiqh is relative. Sharia, can be perceived as something absolute for religious guidance for Muslims, but fiqh is relative. Fiqh can, create various different opinions on the same subject. It can change over time, because one of the principles of fiqh is that the laws should change while the the legal reason, meaning the reality, changes. Al-hukmu yaduru ma'illatihi wujudan wa adama. So, fiqh can, any fake position can change with the changing of reality. Now, secondly, we have, all kind of big problems. It was mentioned that we have the problem of, drug abuse, problem of criminalities, various kind of problems. First, what do we do? Where do we start to address these problems? And what should be the priority? Now, people may say, like in Aceh, the solution for the problem is Sharia. Yes, indeed. But what is Sharia? Is the Constitution of 1945 not the Sharia? Is our national penal codes not the Sharia? We have to think about it. I once had a chance to, raise a question to Sheikh Professor Qureshi Shihab about something related to this. The question that I raised to them was very simple. I asked him, is, the obligation to abide by the traffic law is an obligation of Sharia or not? It is an obligation Sharia-wise. The answer is yes, because it serves, the purposes of Sharia, and also it serves, various, a set of construct of social political system. So then, the logical consequence of this is that the obligation to abide by all the national laws, including our national constitution, is a Sharia obligation. Sharia obligation is Sharia. The point is, we need social order, and we need, a set of legal system to guarantee social order. Now, but then, in international context, in a more international global context, we have also various kind of problems. What do we do? Now that ulama is just, it's not just a matter of putting priorities, but also it's a matter of what we perceive as our domain of, struggle. So we, Nahdlatul Ulama, thinks that the problems of conflict between different groups of identity is a priority to us. And it is in our domain to talk about it, especially related to the religious views. So that we need to discuss about the, the fiqh, the legal reference that needed to shape a new kind of religious view related to this. A religious view that serves more to the need for social harmony and stability. So this is what we do. This is where we start. We have been doing this hard struggle, you know, for very, very long ago. You know, everybody here knows Gus Dur, right? Gus Dur started it long ago. And actually, it started with Kiai Wahab Asbullah. It started with the Nahdlatul Ulama founding fathers, when they, you know, approved and provided the religious legitimacy to the emergence of Indonesia as a nation state, not an Islamic state. This is something new. This is a big because it was none of this kind of political struggle in the past. But our Islamic leaders, it was not just Muhammadiyah actually, you know. It's not just Nahdlatul Ulama, but Muhammadiyah also, and others, and other Islamic leaders in Indonesia, they did approve and give legal religious legitimacy to the emergence of the nation state. This is huge. This is huge. But we still have so many things to discuss and to formulate in order to not just have a solid new discourse related to this matter, but also to generate more and more that we need for, you know, developing a new generation of Muslims with a more compatible, you know, religious views with what we need in our current reality. In our international conference in the 6th of February, the last 6th of February, the questions that we raised to the ulamas who, you know, joined the conference were, first, you know, like I said, it was the topic was about the United Nations Charter, and we explained that we need a new construct of international order because we simply cannot go back to the previous construct of civilization. See, Sharia-wise, we have no choice but to reject the idea of international khilafah. Because if we go to that direction, meaning that we have to dissolve all the existing, you know, social and political entities that exist now. We have to dissolve Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, Saudi Arabia, and everything, you know. And to go to that direction, you have to go to a great world war, you know, with who knows for how long, and you need to kill, you know, who knows how many billion lives, and that we can easily conclude is against the purposes of Sharia. So it simply has to be rejected for the sake of Sharia, because it is against Sharia. And then people asked, what about all this corpus of fiqh legacy? Because if you look into the fiqh legacy, what we find there, all over the corpus of fiqh legacy, is the aspiration to have an universal khilafat. So then again, we need to clarify that fiqh is not necessarily Sharia itself, because fiqh can change and should change when the reality changes. Now, so we've been striving all these years, and just in the last year of my term in the Central Board of Nahdlatul Ulama, we already did, for example, the R20 conference, gathering of religious leaders from various religions internationally. And then we have this international conference on the fiqh of civilization. So the question that we raised in this fiqh conference on fiqh civilization were, first, was the international consensus, namely the United Nations Charter, legitimate? Was it as a transaction, as mu'ahada, as Aqdul Mu'ahada, legitimate in the eye of Sharia? Was every leader of the nation who represented each respective nation, was legitimate as the representative of, the citizens of their respective nation to make the deal, the transaction for this international consensus, including the non-Muslim leader who represent a nation with Muslim citizens. And we talk about, for example, Bung Karno, Insinyur Soekarno, as the representative of Indonesia, we can easily say that he is a legitimate representative of Indonesian citizens, of Indonesian Muslims. But now, what about Jawaharlal Nehru, for example, and Mao Zedong? When they made the deal for this international consensus, did they legitimately represent Muslim citizens in their respective countries? Those were the questions that we tossed, we raised in that conference. And all the answer is yes. Yes, the United Nations as international consensus is legitimate in the eye of Sharia. Yes, the leader, of various nations were legitimate representatives of, the citizens of respective nations that they represented, including the Muslim citizens. That means that the consensus, is binding everybody, including Muslims, as citizens, as minorities in a non-Muslim majority countries. So that was the conclusion. But then we still have so many problems. One of them is that fundamentally, this international consensus actually was a consensus about the vision, not about an immediate effective laws, but a vision. A vision is a direction where everybody actually, or presumably, agreed, to strive for. So we still have so many things to discuss. But then again, we need to start somewhere. And this is where we start. And of course, we need to mobilize, as much as we can, the intellectual resources from academic circles, not just in Islamic world, but all around the world. Because this is not just a problem for Islam. It's a problem for everybody. If you talk about jihad, it's not just Islam that has the idea of jihad. Please understand that the Judaism also has the idea of jihad, the view of jihad. The Christianity also has it. Hinduism also has it. That's why we have all this kind of problem in India, in the United States, in Myanmar, and everywhere in the world, because this idea of jihad is not exclusive to Islam. That is why I very oftenly, again and again, express, my feeling that I don't really like this discourse of moderate Islam. I don't like it, honestly. Because the assumptions of this discourse is that, first, Islam is the sole suspect. While the problem is not comes only from Islam, it comes from everywhere. If you wonder, want to find who is guilty in this problem, everybody is guilty. The West has a great guilt in this matter. And why should we moderate our religiosity? See, because moderate, put an imagination about not fully Islam. This is moderated. Don't be 100% Islam, 100% Muslim. 50% is enough. We don't want that. So what we need to clarify now is not just whether we want to be more fundamentally Muslim or not. What we need to clarify is Sharia and Fiqh. Sharia is the paradigmatic, reference. Then Fiqh, we need to think about the current reality to have a new view of how to respond based on the values that we believe in Islam. And the most important of everything is that we have to keep the hope for a better future, regardless how huge the problems that we are facing. We cannot simply, the problem is too big, let's just expect the end of the day, the doomsday now. This is the exact ideology of this, what so-called extremism and radicalism. Basically, fundamentally they are striving for Qiyamah. That's why all their symbol actually, relates to Qiyamah. Black flag and so forth, They talk about Imam Mahdi and so forth, Let's not rush to Qiyamah. Qiyamah will happen when it happens. We do not need to necessarily rush for it. Let's keep our hope for a better future with a more constructive and realistic attitude, about the problems we are facing. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've finished this first plenary session, but I would like to remind you all of the argument led by Professor Ruhaini. Indonesia is the best role model for negotiating or dealing or coming to terms with the dynamics between fiqh and also human rights, positive law, and also humanity. And then Al-Mukarram K. Yahya remind us of the concept of Sharia voice. You have, I'm now to conclude this session with his statement. You need to strive for harmony. You need to strive for harmonious relationship of different identities. Let's keep our hope for better life. Thank you, and thanks Al-Mukarram K. Yahya, Professor Ruhaini. Again, please join us to give them all a big applause again. Thank you. Back to the Master of Ceremony for giving a token of appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the chair, Prof. Muzaki. Ladies and gentlemen, all the distinguished chair and speakers, thank you for the session. We believe that we represent the audience, that we are truly enlightened with the session on the theme, Rethinking Fiqh for Nonviolent Religious Practices. And for the session, for the next program is the session of presenting token of appreciation. We would humbly invite Dr. Niam, MPhil PhD, to come to the stage. He is the chief of the organizing committee of this conference.
Takrimul hadaya allati sayuqaddimuha ra'isul lajnatil mu'tamar fadilatul Dr. Niam falyatakaram fadilatuhu.
Again, we thank very much the distinguished chair of this session, Prof. Ahmad Zaki, MAG Grad Deep C, MPhil PhD, Dr. Honoris Causa K. Haji Yahya Khalil Thaquf, and Prof. Siti Ruhaini Zuhayatin, as well as Dr. Abdullahi An-Naim for such a great session. We also would like to announce to all the audience that we will be still having another great plenary, the second plenary that will be held shortly after this. And the distinguished speakers have already been in the venue.
أيها السادة، سوف نخطو إلى الجلسة الثانية، ولقد حضر معنا الأول الشيخ الأستاذ الدكتور أسامة السيد الأزهري، والثاني الدكتور محمد المراكبي، والثالث الدكتور إمام نهائي، والرابع الأستاذ الدكتور راحمين أفندي بن عبد الرحيم من جامعة مالايا.